Whew, we have got another young team here to talk about from a dynasty perspective, of course, here at the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Show, Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I guess you can call it whichever one, depending on how you're consuming it. And it's part of the Old Man Squad Fantasy Network. As always, I'm Noah Rubin, and today we're talking about the Hornets. If we're looking at just overall situations, I don't think that there's too many in the NBA that I would say are just hopeless. Everybody has at least like one or two players to be excited about, or a pick to be excited about, or a reason to be hopeful. And the Hornets have that too. That's not me prefacing that to just say, but actually the Hornets, because they have LaMelo Ball, they have Brandon Miller, they have Mark Williams when he plays, you know, and you can actually say that for pretty much everybody on the team because they seem to have worse injury luck than everybody else in the league, but they also have the third best odds to win this draft lottery. So there is a path here. But if we're just looking back at last season as well, it's not a fun one to talk about. The last two episodes we've talked about the Jazz and the Wizards. A little bit more fun to talk about, specifically Washington. I think if you would have said even 1 year ago, but specifically like over the last few years, I wish more teams built their team the way the Wizards do. Like you'd be laughed at. That would be, I mean, they're trying to think if there's too many teams that you could definitively say, no, I'd rather build my team like Washington over the last few years. But that's just talking about the Wizards again, which, by the way, we're also publishing columns over at Roto World recapping this past season, and it just happens to line up pretty closely with how we're doing these shows. I believe it's just a day apart with some of them. So make sure to check those out. I'll be doing, I think, the Wizards and the Hornets columns, so those will be coming out over the next few days. And since it's written, gives me more time to formulate my thoughts, probably more detailed content over there. But if you enjoy the podcast form, if you enjoy the video form, we're here for that as well. And it'll still be good content. Don't worry. I'm not saying this isn't going to be the good stuff. It still will be. Before we get into the Hornets, just want to remind you guys that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season, we've got that. It's in full swing. I'm going to use that pun every time because you can. It's fun. We also, of course, have NBA and NHL playoffs, specifically with the NBA playoffs. As always, this is an NBA podcast, so we will mention the lines for some of these games. Tonight we have Celtics and Magic and Cavs and Heat, with Celtics and Cavs both heavy favorites in those games. The lines I'm currently looking at, 12.5-point favorites are the Celtics, and the Cavs are 12-point favorites. I hope that the games are closer. I hope that they don't cover because the playoffs are more fun when the games are close. And then, of course, we have game 2 of the Rockets-Warriors series, which is going to be just continue to be one of the better series, I think. I picked the Warriors. I think the Warriors win. I think it'd be shocking if they don't. But with Houston making their return to the postseason this year as the 2 seed, they're favored by 3 points currently for game 2. So, the odds of them winning in Golden State are lower. So hopefully they don't head there down 0-2, because that would not be what you'd want from this young core, but that'll bring a lot of questions for them. But that'll be a show for a few weeks from now. Won't be one that we're talking about today, because we're talking about the Charlotte Hornets, not the Houston Rockets, and how they're going to build out their team. With the largest selection of odds on everything, obviously we mentioned the NBA odds, but also you have the MLB, the NHL, UFC. BetOnline remains the number one online source for all your sports wagering info. BetOnline, the game starts here. Well, let's get in to start talking about the Charlotte Hornets. And I'm just going to go ahead and make the noise again. Ugh. Not a fun team to talk about here. It's actually the closest team in location to me, so I go to Hornets games, and it's interesting actually seeing real life Hornets fans in the flesh. It's very strange. I've had people randomly strike up conversations with me at the games or try to ask me my thoughts or they're like, oh, like, what do you think we should do? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what y'all need to do. This isn't a we situation. This is a y'all situation. Um, or sometimes I fake it. I'm like, yeah, no, I think what we need to do is whatever, whatever the conversation ends up being, just to play along sometimes. But it's cool seeing real Hornets fans in real life. They went 19-63 this season, not by design. I think this is, I guess, three different paths with the first three teams we've talked about. I think Utah kind of knew that they wanted to lose games this year, so they made that happen. Washington knew they wanted to focus on development this year, so they made that happen. It resulted in losses. I don't think Charlotte came in with the intention of, hey, we're going to be back at the top of the lottery. It was probably like, hey, we have some talented players. Let's see what we can make happen. I think that if this team is fully healthy, they're closer to a play-in team than the top of the lottery. I think if you have LaMelo Ball for 70-plus games, Mark Williams for 70-plus games, and Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges for 70-plus games, they're not a 19-win team. I think you can, if we go down the list, or I'll probably end up saying that for almost every team. The next few we talk about the Pelicans and the 76ers. Yeah, if they're fully healthy, they're better than what they were. But yeah, it doesn't make it easy when you lack talent. Like Charlotte, like they have a couple guys that are very good, but they're obviously not just like a lock for the playoffs every year by any means. And you have to mix in the injury bug. Doesn't make things easy. But there are, like I said, some young players that are a lot of fun. Most notably for Dynasty. I mean, he's still a young guy, but I think he's pretty much established who he is, what he is. We're talking about LaMelo Ball. He'll turn 24 in August, 25.2 points per game, 4.9 rebounds, 7.4 assists per game. Also averaged 1.1 steals and 3.8 threes. Played 47 games. I mean, that's not great. He's a guy that's, I want to say, was kind of like a second or third round pick this past season in redraft leagues after being a late first, early second the year before. Last three seasons, so he played 47 this year, 22 the year before, 36 the year before that. The year before that, he played 75 games. They were in the play-in tournament. That's what I mean with, I think Charlotte is better than a 19-win team if they had everyone healthy, but they just can't make that happen. They can't get all these guys healthy at the same time or for even a full season. Makes it pretty frustrating. It was a healthier season for LaMelo. I mean, he had a stretch in late November to December where he missed a handful of games. Same thing late January, early February, and then he missed the last however many games of the season when it was basically already done for the year. No big deal about those last few games. So I think had Charlotte been playing competitive basketball, I probably would have been close to like 55 games. So it is a healthier season for LaMelo. It's still not ideal, but he's just so good. When he's on the floor, he's too good to not be considered one of the best players in fantasy basketball. We can debate where he ranks in real life, how you want to build your franchise, if he is a true franchise cornerstone and a player that you think you can win a championship building around. That can be debated. But I think when he's on the floor, he's one of the most impactful players in fantasy basketball. We know he's not going to shoot the ball efficiently, 40.5% from the floor this year, which was like a drop off from the year before, 43.3% the year before. And then he's going to turn the ball over. I'm not too worried about those two things because he's one of those players that you just want him to be himself and play freely, and mistakes happen because of that. But he's so much, the threat of him making the highlight plays or making the fun reads or just making incredible plays, the threat of that alters the defense. So you can live with some bad shots. You can live with some sloppy passes because those are also going to go in at times, and they're also going to end up being assists at times. And so I'm not too worried about those from a team building perspective, and then from a fantasy perspective, we just build around it in a category league. You just okay, like I'll punt field goal percentage and turnovers. You don't get too stressed if you have Giannis and you are like, ooh, but what about unless you're in a roto league? But what about my free throws and my threes and my turnovers? Oh, you just punt them. You can do that in Dynasty as well. You can definitely build a team, but it even makes it easier. Not easier necessarily, but you can factor that into trades. Just say, hey, I'm not too concerned about these two categories because my team is built around LaMelo Ball and Trae Young. I don't care about field goal percentage and turnovers because I know I'm going to lose those. I'm going to try and win every matchup 7-2. So I'm not too concerned about that. I think the main thing is, can LaMelo be healthy? Can he stay healthy? Average a career high 25.2 points per game this year. That's good to see. Good to see him take that step. I feel like I'm almost just going to keep repeating the same points just to try and add more details about LaMelo, but legitimately, we just need him to play games. You can probably get him at a discount from, like, if you're trying to trade for him, just because nobody, like, it's one thing for it to be okay, this is an injury riddled season or injury riddled 2 seasons. For it to be 3 years in a row, which this one was not nearly as bad as the last two. Should anyone have optimism that, okay, no, like next year he could play 70 games? Like, yes, he can. It's possible. But why? Like, it's difficult to bank on that at this point and to like realistically say, no, like this is what I think is going to happen. Like, if you're building out projections, there's no way your projections are expecting him to play 70 games. Just not going to happen. But that's okay. He's talented enough to make him worth it. So if you're able to buy low on LaMelo, I would definitely do that. The other factor here is, just like this season with a lot of teams down the stretch, if Charlotte is back in the lottery next year, they're not going to force it with him. So that could mess things up. But if you went off of like standard fantasy playoffs, I guess, like not platform standard, but just kind of like industry standard. I believe the playoffs were March 17th through 23rd or around there. LaMelo didn't get shut down until after that. So that's, I guess you could be a little optimistic about that. At least that didn't happen. At least he didn't get shut down early March. But obviously, it just depends on the health of his ankles. So that's what I'm going to keep coming back to. So I'm going to move on to talk about somebody else before I just mention that LaMelo Ball needs to be healthier. Because he's not the only one that needs to be healthier to be impactful in fantasy basketball. That is also an impactful player when we see him on the floor. Another guy that fits that same mold is Mark Williams, who averaged 15.3 points, 10.2 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.2 blocks, shot 60.4% from the floor, did all that in 26.6 minutes per game. If you're looking at 9-cat scoring on Basketball Monster, he was 39th in 9-cat, best on the team. It's hard to not just repeat the same points. He just needs to be healthy. Him and LaMelo on the floor together for a full season, I think, is going to be a really dynamic duo, dynamic pick and roll duo. But it just hasn't happened. I mean, we're able to see Mark Williams play most of the season. He didn't ever get fully shut down. He didn't start his season until December. And then obviously there was the little stretch where he got traded to the Lakers and then didn't, which I'd love some more clarity on that situation. I think just knowing what the deal was, because the Lakers said that it was, I guess after the deal was made, he didn't pass the physical, but then he was able to play in Charlotte's next game in LA, and the Hornets won. Mark Williams played 29 games. So I don't know what qualifies as passing a physical. Like, I'm not sure exactly how that process works. Is it just no, the Lakers doctors aren't passing him, or is there like a set standard for what like counts for passing a physical, or is it does it vary team by team? Was it the Lakers kind of regretting making the trade and then going to their doctors and saying, hey, if you see literally anything, like void the deal, like don't let him pass the physical? Or was it like, I don't know. I think it would be nice to have some clarity. I don't know what kind of shenanigans went in there. It would be nice just so we can have a better outlook of Mark Williams. I don't really care if the Lakers were like, no, we don't like this trade anymore. Let's try and undo it by saying he failed his physical. Because to me, I'm like, well, shoot, this guy that's already missed a ton of time in his career just failed a physical that would have had him traded. That's concerning. What am I supposed to do with him? Like, I don't really want to have to worry about a guy that can't pass a physical and has already had so many injuries, even though he's so good when he's out there. But then he was able to play most of the rest of the season. It is very weird. Very, very weird. I don't know. Hopefully we'll get a fully healthy season on Mark Williams next year. And I don't know. I'll be a little bit more optimistic about him and his health. I think I will take more of an optimistic stance after he played 19 games in year 2, 43 games in year 1, and 44 games this past season. I think the way he finished out the year, if they approach it with the same mentality that, I mean, it's pretty sad to see, but like the way the 76ers and Joel Embiid were, or the way that a couple other teams were a couple of years ago, or the Clippers with Kawhi, or the Lakers with Anthony Davis a few years ago, where they're like, no, he's not going to play back-to-backs. Maybe not saying that as directly as Joel Embiid did at Media Day, but just kind of, hey, if you're experiencing any pain, we're just not going to play you today. And especially not on back-to-backs, or if there's, a certain amount of games and a certain amount of nights, like we're just going to manage your games, manage your minutes at times, because he's so good when he's on the floor. I mean, I'm just looking through some of his games from this past season when he played over 30 minutes per game. Let's see. So just the games that he played at least 30 minutes. First one was in December 2012, 2-2-3. It's incredible. Then next time, that was in 31 minutes, 36 minutes, 31 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, a block. 2 days later, plays 33 minutes, 19 points, 19 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 2 blocks. Then he had 38 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists in 33 minutes. Then 15, 9, 3, 1, 3 in 31 minutes. 11, 8, 5, 1, 1 in 33 minutes. That's probably the worst performance out of him. And then at 2015, 23, 14, 26, 16, 24, 12. Like when he plays 30 minutes, he's really, really good. Really, really productive. Excellent for fantasy. Would have been nice for the Lakers to have him in the playoffs this year, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just saying that from like a fantasy perspective. And I don't know. I still think that having him catch lobs from Luka would be a good thing for the team. But Jackson Hayes it is then. Hopefully they can have Mark Williams be healthy. Hopefully they can have LaMelo Ball be healthy. Hopefully they can have, I was hoping my internet would cooperate with me to load this fast enough so I could segue right into, hopefully they can have Brandon Miller be healthy next season. He's coming off not playing a ton, just 27 games, average 21 points, 4.9 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1.1 steals, 3.9 threes per game. Didn't have a great shooting season when he played before his wrist injury that ended his season in January, but shot 40.3% from the floor. That was a pretty steep drop from 44% as a rookie. But he shot a lot more threes. He had one game with 7 threes, one game with 8 threes, one game with 6, 2 more with 7, another game with 6 before his season-ending injury. 4 threes per game is insane. Let me pull up and see where that would have been if he played out a full season, because there isn't too many players that are going to hit 3.9 threes per game. And for him to just do that in year 2, It's great. So 3.9 would have been tied for third with Malik Beasley for threes per game, just behind Steph and Anthony Edwards and just ahead of LaMelo Ball. So the Hornets have their guys that they're going to be relying on to hit some threes. I think Brandon Miller is going to be very good. In a industry way too early mock. I believe trying to remember. I'll see if I can pull this up as I'm saying it, where Brandon Miller went in that. So even if you're listening to this and using it less for dynasty leagues, Brandon Miller went. I'll try and find that as I'm saying this now. I'm just stretching out what I'm saying. Anyways, later than you may have expected, just because he's coming off injury plagued season, just one way too early season ending injury. Excuse me, I got him because I was like, I thought I grabbed him, but round 5, and this is a 14 team league. So that was pick 66 that I grabbed him. And I saw him go as high as the 3rd round last year, which was probably a bit of a reach. But he's a guy that maybe is going under the radar a little bit at this point, partially because he's in Charlotte, partially because he barely played this past season, but he was really, really impactful despite a poor shooting season. I don't think he's a 40% shooter, like from the floor. I think he's definitely going to raise that up this year, get closer to more of like an average field goal percentage, maybe slightly below average just because of the amount of threes he's going to take. But I think he could definitely bounce back this year. Just needs to be healthy, but he projects, I don't know. I like the way that he fits in trying to establish a culture with this team, like a winning culture. I think you kind of saw it during his rookie year. And then since he didn't play the final 3 months of this season because of the injury, we kind of forget about it because of the amount of storylines. Heck, last time Brandon Miller played an NBA game, Luka Doncic was a Maverick. So a lot happens. That makes us forget about some of these guys. But Brandon Miller still has that star upside. We can't forget about that. And I'm expecting to see that at a higher level next season. All right. Those are, well, okay. There's one more guy that we just absolutely need to talk about for Charlotte. And then it's a handful of guys that we can kind of mention. I don't want to say mention as like, oh, they're just like footnotes here, but they don't necessarily have the same intrigue or upside or guaranteed role. And I don't even know if this last guy does either. But we have to talk about Charlotte's pick. Dijon Salon, 6th overall last year. The main reason that I will continue to have hope, I don't even want to say like optimism may not be the right word, but like a little hope that, hey, maybe this pick wasn't terrible. He's not going to turn 20 until August. Was the youngest, from what I remember, the youngest player in the draft. Definitely among the early picks. And was just expected to be a raw prospect. Like that's like if you're playing 2K and you had his archetype there, that's probably what it would have been. Just raw prospect. Played 60 games as a rookie, 20.7 minutes per game, 5.9 points, 4.7 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 1 3, 33% from the floor. NBA.com has him listed at 6'8", 207. I think he had the main, I guess, NBA level skill that he has right now is the rebounding. He had 2 double-doubles as a rookie. And a couple of other games where he was able to score in double digits. What do we do here? What do we do? Do we just automatically say, well, yeah, we said it was a bad pick at the beginning. Like it was definitely too early. He was projected outside the lottery or barely inside the lottery in a lot of mocks, and Charlotte took him 6th. I mean, yeah, it was a pretty interesting pick at the time. But he has time. Everybody loves to react immediately or barely give anybody any time to develop. but he's so young. I'd rather just bank on him like figuring things out. So just to put this into perspective right now, um believe I'm just looking at next year's class. There is a lot of freshmen at the top of that class. So, but there are still some that are so VJ Edgecombe is older than Tijan Salon, as is Con Knuppel is just a week older. Derek Queen is older. Colin Murray Boyles is a sophomore. Obviously, he's older. Rasheer Fleming Jr., older. Danny Wolf Jr., older. So, like, this is just an incredibly young class. So it's not going to have the same effect that maybe a couple of the more recent classes have had. But he would, like, if, at his age, he would be fine in this upcoming class. So you basically got a rookie a year early with how young he is. I don't know. That's probably like a way of twisting it to be positive when it's not necessarily that much of a positive, not that strong of a positive. But there are players that are going to go in the top 10 of this draft that are still older than him. So we can look at that and say, okay, like, let's give him a few years. Now, maybe there wasn't too many flashes during his rookie year that make you say, oh, I can see it. Oh, I can see how this guy's gonna be a star. He just needs a lot of time because he's very raw. Like, there wasn't even too many of those. Like, there were some, but not too many. So he's an interesting player to analyze because it's very easy to write him off immediately. And maybe you take that as a buy low opportunity. Like, just somebody's going to say, "I know he's definitely a bust. Let me trade for him." Or maybe you can convince someone that, yeah, this guy is younger than a couple of the players that are about to be drafted in the top 10. I I'll take the chance and maybe convince someone to allow you to sell high. Could work. You could also just keep him and hope that he pans out. And then you could also just shy away because you're like, hey, like, I hear your point, but I'm not a believer that he's ever going to figure it out. That's fine. I'm not upset about it because I'm not. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not planting my flag and saying, no, 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 this was a good pick by the Hornets. All I'm saying is that it is too early to definitively say either way. He's too young to do that. He give him a couple of years, especially because he's not coming in as a 21-year-old or even 20. Like, he came in and he turned 19 shortly after he was drafted. Over like a month and a half after he was drafted, turned 19. I don't know. I'll say when he's 21 or 22, I'll feel a little bit better about drawing a full conclusion about who he is and who he can be as a player. I'm not ready to do that quite yet. All right, we're gonna breeze through the rest of the players in this team because a lot of them we either kind of know what they are or like, yeah, they had some fun flashes, but I'm not really sure how highly we should value them in Dynasty. So we have Miles Bridges. We pretty much know what he is at this point. Like, he's going to average 20.3 points per game this past season. He's going to benefit from LaMelo and Brandon Miller being out. Like, that's what happened this past year. It's what happened the year before with LaMelo out. I think he's a solid number 3 or 4 option. Doesn't have too much upside to like still grow at this point, too much room to grow at this point. But I think he's definitely like a competent player statistically, that you can kind of rely on to give you good numbers. Yeah, not too much to say there. I think it's just kind of what he is at this point. Trey Mann had some good games. He also only played 13 of them, which, I haven't even said it yet, and I'm gonna wait. Actually, we are now 30 minutes into this episode, and I haven't said one thing, just like about Charlotte's injury reporting, other than just saying, yeah, it was kind of annoying that, or LaMelo Ball wasn't very healthy, and Mark Williams wasn't very healthy, and Brandon Miller wasn't very healthy. Didn't say anything about the way they report these injuries. no clarity on Trey Man's situation. Then he played 13 games. It was very reminiscent of the way they operated the year before with Mark Williams and LaMelo Ball, and the way they continue to operate and have operated for the last few years. If we're going to roster Charlotte players in Dynasty, it's frustrating. If we're going to do it in any fantasy format, it's frustrating because we don't know what's going on. Grant Williams' season ended early. He only played 16 games. I think he's a really solid role player. Can be a good starter, I think. Like a player that you're comfortable starting to space the floor and play defense. Doesn't translate to great fantasy production often. Nick Smith Jr., KJ Simpson showed some flashes here and there as young guards, but with LaMelo there, and then if Trey Man's healthy, and then if they add a guard in the draft as well, not really seeing the direct path, but they're both guys that I'm happy to stash. Yusuf Nurkic is there. Josh Okogie, again, solid rotation piece. Not great for fantasy. Same thing with Josh Green. You could probably say there's a little bit more upside there with Josh Green, but more of just a solid rotation piece. Here's one more guy that I'll say that I'd like to talk about for his fantasy upside and potential. Moussa Diabate, who had some really strong games when Mark Williams and Nick Richards were both out. And then a couple late in the season as well, can just dominate the glass. Had some really nice rebounding games. Doesn't do too much else, but I think he's still fairly young. I mean, he's 23. It's not as young as some of the other guys we've talked about, but young enough where there's still some upside there. But most of his impact is going to be on the glass, so kind of limits his fantasy upside. But as we've talked about, players tend to not stay healthy with Charlotte. So if Mark Williams, just looking at trends, not saying anything just negatively about Charlotte's medical stuff, like they're not good enough and they result in their players getting injured. Not saying that. Not saying, oh, these players, just their bodies won't hold up. Just anything like that. Just looking at the numbers, just looking at the trends. Mark Williams hasn't played 50 games in a season through his first 3 seasons. Could that happen next year? Sure. Like, if it doesn't happen, like, we're not going to be surprised. That means a lot of minutes and it starts for Moussa Diabate, potential starts. So a guy that's worth stashing for that reason, and I think he's a pretty good player. I mean, in Dynasty leagues, if we're rostering 350 to 400 players, yes, Moussa Diabate is absolutely a player to consider rostering that has some upside and has shown the ability to be a pretty good fantasy player when he gets the chance. All right, who else? Do we have anybody else in Charlotte that we can mention? I mean, outside of some flashes we got from guys like DeQuan Jeffries, Damian Baugh, Wendell Moore Jr., like, do we even say the names Seth Curry and Taj Gibson in a Dynasty show? I don't really know. I did it. I don't feel like the need to talk about them more, with all due respect. Just doesn't make sense for a Dynasty podcast. Got a little bit more out of the Hornets than I was expecting, probably because I just rambled about a couple of guys a little bit longer than maybe I needed to. But I had to stretch the content a little bit because that there isn't as many guys as the last 2 teams had to talk about. But we'll see. Right now, Charlotte has the 3rd best odds at the number 1 pick. I think that you can build out a really a solid starting 5 with a number of different players from the top of this draft. I think LaMelo's obviously point guard, Mark Williams the center. I think you can. We'll see if Charlotte has any interest in this. When they had the number 2 pick, 2023, and everybody's expecting to take Scoot to have Scoot play with LaMelo, they opted for Brandon Miller, which, yes, Brandon Miller has been better to this point, and I would say Charlotte made the right pick. I will cede that. We'll see if they shy away from taking a guy like Dylan Harper because they want the ball to be in LaMelo's hands. We'll see. But You could say that LaMelo is a 1 or a 2, or can it play alongside another point guard? Well, I don't even want to say LaMelo is a 2, but like potentially have LaMelo and Dylan Harper on the floor at the same time. Like that could work. You can have Brandon Miller at the 2 or the 3, Miles Bridges at the 3 or the 4. So like they have a number of positions that they could select. I wouldn't really want them going center, but given Mark Williams' health, like it wouldn't shock me if they slipped a couple spots and did. But having either like an Ace Bailey or a VJ Edgecombe, assuming they don't get Cooper Flag, of course, having one of those guys to fill out a lineup, like that's a solid 5 to like say this. Okay, this is our franchise starting 5 that we're building around, and then you just if you're healthy, then it works out pretty well. I think there's a number of guys that can fill out that lineup for them. Interested to see how the lottery plays out in a few weeks, and then how the draft plays out after that. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Show. You can still check out the first 2 episodes we did. And then this next one, I believe, is on the Pelicans. Tomorrow's episode will be. And then we'll have a guest on Friday to talk about this past draft class, to be able to kind of recap that and project how some of those guys will play moving forward. And we're going to keep up the grind of this daily show as long as we can. We'll check back in a few weeks to see if we're going to keep doing that. But as of right now, that's the plan. So you can be sure to check out these episodes daily, Monday through Friday. You can follow me on Twitter at NoahRubin22. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. It helps me be able to share this show with more people. And it encourages me to continue with the daily format if things are looking good numbers-wise. But that's going to do it for this episode, and I will see you next time.